Hello, this is going to be lesson 3a on solving equations of the form of ax plus b equals c. Basically, equations that have a number in front of the x plus or minus a number equals another number. Okay? Basically, whenever we talk about equations comes from the word equal. That's why it says equations. So basically, these are equations, and what do they have in common? They all have the equal sign. Okay, the goal of solving equations is to get the variable alone on one side of the equation. Well, what does it mean, the one side of the equation? Well, equation comes from the word equal, and that's because the equal sign is your border, is your divider. There's the left side and the right side. So one thing I like to do is draw the line, so I always remember the left versus the right side. So on these problems here, I'm going ahead and drawing the lines. Okay? So let's focus right now on the first problem. Okay? My goal, the thing that I want to do is to get the letter by itself. So in order to get the x alone, that means I need to get rid of the 2 and the 1. So which one do I start with? I always start out with the number farthest away from the letter. So if I compare 2 and 1, 1 is the one that is far away from the letter. So I'm going to start by canceling the 1. How do I cancel positive 1? I do the opposite. What is the opposite of adding? The opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to do minus 1 on both sides of the equation. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line right there. Okay, and positive 1, negative 1, they cancel, so I just cross them out. And that means on this side of the equation, I'm left with 2x. So I'm going to bring it down. 2x equals. And here I have positive 3 and negative 1. The signs are different, so I subtract. It would be a 2. And it would be positive 2 because 3 is the biggest digit. Alright, so if you notice, my goal is to get the letter alone. The letter is not alone yet, but we're getting closer. Before we had 2 and 1. Now we only have 2. So we're getting closer to the answer. So now we need to get rid of the 2. The 2 is multiplying the x, so the opposite of multiplication is division. So what I'm going to do is divide both sides by 2. And 2 divided by 2, the 2 cancels, so I'm left with the x alone. And if you notice, that's my goal, to get the letter alone. So when I divide it by 2, on this side the x get alone, and on this side 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the answer for my problem over here is 1. Okay? Alright, let's go ahead and proceed to the next problem. So let me bring it up to view. Alright, very well. This time we have negative 5x plus 2 equals negative 3. Remember our goal. What we want to do in this problem. We want to get the letter x alone. To do that, we need to get rid of the 5 and the 2. Now, which one should I start first? I always start out with the one that is far away from the x. In this case, between the 5 and the 2 is the one that is far away. So let's get rid of the 2. If this is a positive 2 and I want to get rid of it, I'm going to do the opposite of adding, which would be subtracting. And the one thing about equation is if you do one thing on one side, you must do the same thing on the other side. So we put negative 2 here and negative 2 on the other side. I always like to draw a line right there because that reminds me that I'm adding and subtracting depending on the signs. Because notice right here, signs are different. I subtract. So in other words, what happens? 2 minus 2 is 0. So in other words, they cancel. Okay? So what am I left with on this side? I'm left with negative 5x. So I bring it down. Negative 5x. Alright. On the other side, I have the signs are the same. So the rule says if the signs are the same, you add. So 3 plus 2 is 5. And is it going to be positive or negative? Well, the sign of the biggest is negative because 3 is the biggest, so the answer would be negative. Alright, So now I got negative 5x equals negative 5. So we're getting closer to the answer. Remember, our goal, our objective, the one thing we want to do is get the x alone. So in order to do that, we need now to get rid of the negative 5. So that means we're going to divide. And when you divide, that's one thing you need to remember. Whatever you see here on the side of x, you're going to write underneath. So if you see positive 5, you write positive 5. If you see negative 5, we write negative 5. Notice here on the previous problem, we had 2x, we wrote 2x. We saw a 2, we write a 2. Okay? So on this problem, we see a negative 5. What are we going to divide both sides by? Negative 5. And basically, what that does is, we're making sure to divide by negative 5 because we want to make sure that the negative cancels, the 5 cancels, and da-da-da-da, we get the letter alone. That's what we want to do. Okay? Alright? We want to get the letter alone, and that's what we did. On the other side, then we need to do the division. Negative 5 divided by negative 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1, and the negative divided by negative becomes a positive. So my answer in this case also again is positive 1. Alright, I just wanted to point it out. Okay, it's very important to organize your work. Okay, if you notice here, I try to write the numbers right underneath the number that I'm subtracting or adding. I always like to draw this line here. That's a reminder to me that I'm adding, subtracting. Also, do you see that I put the equal sign? And also, when I'm dividing, I put this little line on one side and then on the other. Okay, if you keep your paper organized and neat, you will always be able to get the final answer. Okay, and you also be able to retrace your step if you find that you made a mistake. Okay, so this is a little strategy that I'm sharing with you that helps you get the right answer. Okay, alright, let's go ahead and continue to the next problem. Okay, the next problem is a little bit different when we compare with the two previous problems. So the two previous problems, the x was on the left. On this case, the x is on the right. But that's okay. Remember our goal? Our goal is to get the letter alone on one side. It doesn't matter what side. Okay, so if the x is on this side, let's focus our attention on this side. Our goal is to get the x alone. We have 4 and negative 3. Remember, we always start with the number that is far away from the x. In this case, it's the 4. So how do I get rid of 4? Well, 4 is positive. To get rid of positive 4, we're going to do minus 4. And one thing about equation, if you do one thing on one side, you have to do the same thing on the other side. And remember my strategy? Draw a line. That line helps us remember that what we're going to do with these numbers, we're going to add and subtract. Okay, signs are here the signs are different. This is positive, this is negative, so that means you're going to subtract. So 4 minus 4 gives you 0. So in other words, they cancel. So on this side, we're just going to bring down the negative 3x. Okay, and may I say that you need to be very, very careful, because a lot of times the common mistake is the students will bring down the 3x, but they forget the negative. Never forget the sign that goes along with the number. If you see a negative, bring down the negative. That's very, very important. Okay. On the other side, we have positive 10, negative 4. So the signs are different. So we're going to subtract. So it would be 6. And sign of the biggest would be positive. So we don't have to write anything. Remember, positive signs can be invisible if the number is by itself. In this case, it's by itself. I don't have to write the positive sign. But we do know that the positive sign is there. Okay? Alright, so we're getting closer to our answer because the x is almost alone. Not there yet, but close. So what do we need to do to get rid of the negative 3? Well, the negative 3 is multiplying. The opposite multiplication is division. So we're going to do that little line right there. And we're going to divide by whatever is next to the x. In this case, is negative 3. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 3. And basically here, the negatives cancel, the 3 cancels, so you're left with x alone, and that's our goal. And on this side, we do the division. Positive 6 divided by negative 3. 6 divided by 3 is a 2. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. And there you go. Okay. Alright, so that is the answer for our problem. Alright, let's do one more problem. Okay. Okay, on this problem, remember, I'm drawing the the line to always remember, keep in mind that I have the left and the right side of the equation, and my job is to get one of the sides with the letter alone. So in this case, the x is over here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel the 31. This is a negative 31, so to cancel it, I'm going to do the opposite, which is positive 31. And make sure to do it on both sides. Alright, now that we did on both sides, make sure you put a line. Negative 1, positive 31 cancels. That means you're going to bring down the 7x. Equal sign. And negative 10, positive 31. Signs are different, so we're going to subtract. So this would be 21, positive. And we want the x alone, so we're going to divide both sides by 7. So now that we divide it, we're going to cancel the 7s, and we get an x equals 21 divided by 7 is 3. Okay? So I hope you can see that it's very important to keep track of your signs and know exactly what you're doing. Because remember, there's two sets of rules that you need to keep in mind. The rules of adding, subtracting, and the rules of multiplying, dividing. So that's why I like to draw these lines right here, because this line right here, the big one, reminds me that I'm adding, subtracting these rules. So that means I'm going to use the sign of the biggest. The little line reminds me that this is division. So that means I'm using another different set of rules, which is a positive divided by a positive is a positive. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. Okay? A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And also you could have negative divided by a positive is a negative. So please remember, the extra work that sometimes requires here to draw these lines is very, very helpful. It's a strategy, something that will help us get the answer. They help us do better. So I hope that you can use these strategies to get the right answers on your assignments. Okay? So right now what you're going to do is you're going to stop the video and you're going to proceed to do assignment 3A. Okay? Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.